Hello and welcome to Ride Rescue. In this episode of the 1960 Pontiac that, well, if you've been watching the past videos, you'll see I dragged this out of a garage that had been sitting for over 40 years. The previous owner had pulled the whole front end off. And in this, I'll kind of give you a little bit more of the history and some of the information about this original engine and the things that I've done to it. So now I'm anxious to get it fired up and get it tuned and get it timed and start playing with it, and hopefully we can get this thing running to the point where all I need to do is throw on the last bits, the new painted front fenders, get the hood on, get all the trim on, the bumpers on. Let's get this thing out. I've made the comment a few times about how special this car is. It's not completely stock and original, but it looks like it is. It has most of its numbers matching with one little exception. Well, let's call it three little exceptions. So it's a 389 A1 engine, which is the stock engine for the Ventura, the 1960 Ventura. It's a high compression motor. It's 10.25 to 1 compression, runs on premium. This particular motor came from the factory in this car. It does have a serial number stamped on the front of the block, so it does match the serial number of the car. But when it came from the factory, it actually had a 2-barrel carburetor, just over 300 horsepower with a single exhaust. The 6-pack with 3 2-barrels was an option. Pretty rare, unusual option. That Tempest motor, all of the Tempest motor series is a 425 code, when it's actually a 389 motor. There's several different codes and several different things that have been changed within the motor. This particular one has 2-bolt mains. The rare block of the 4 or 5 different blocks has a 4-bolt main. As each one of the engines were changed and massaged for the different cars, the Catalina being a 389, 8 to 1 compression, and a 2-barrel, was more on the economy side, maybe 280, 290 horsepower. The A1 motor was built specifically for an automatic, with a higher compression, which this has. It was pushing just over 300 horsepower with a standard cam. I got the camshaft for the high compression motor, which is actually a 10.5 compression that you would typically get the 6-pack carburetors on. And so this motor with the dual exhaust, even with the original exhaust manifolds, should be pushing about 400 horsepower. Pretty special motor. The intake and the carbs are actually off of a 59 Pontiac. The previous owner had been putting together a bunch of parts to build the hot rod of his dreams. After he started taking it apart, he took the full front clip off the car, started running into bodywork and rust that he didn't know what to deal with. The frame rails, all the suspension was heavily coated with grease and sludge. He started scraping it off and then realized this was just a really large project that him and his buddy were going to be doing over a few years. 40 years later, it was still sitting there. So I was fortunate enough to come across it and have the opportunity to bring it back to life. Since everything was off of the frame and the motor was ready to come out, it was kind of crazy to just put it all back together. That was my original intent. But once I realized how special everything was that he had sitting in the trunk, it just didn't seem right to just put it all back together, all greasy, grimy, and rusty. And the motor, I did actually get it to start. It only ran for less than a minute, and it was horrible. It chugged and burped and died, and it did burn oil, but it ran so poor, shaking and jerking, I assumed it was probably only running on a few cylinders. Once I broke it down, took off the intake manifold to swap it over, because it did still have the original 2-barrel manifold on it. I drained the oil, and the oil had metal flake in it. So with metal flake in the oil, I knew that it needed either be ringed or bearings or both. Once I pulled the intake manifold off, I could see the camshaft, and there was actually pieces of the cam bearing sticking out of the edges of the cam. So I knew that was probably one of the biggest reasons why it was running so poorly. As I started taking the engine apart, there was a couple of the original, yes, it did have the original wiring for the spark plug wires. Several of those were cracked and broken. So this car was abandoned on the side of the road in Nevada. The previous owner, he bought it from a wrecking yard, and he bought a second car. He bought 2 of them, a gray one and the red one. I think we've mentioned that a few times in the past if you've missed those videos. He was hoping to build one out of the 2. The gray one purred. It ran fantastic when he parked it in his backyard. It sat there in the backyard for 40 years, and the weather really took its toll on the car. I was able to fire that engine up, and it still purred, believe it or not. It was crazy. So my original intent, and I think his was too, was to just swap the 2 motors. This one could be saved. The gray car, the rust, the floors were gone. It had heavy damage in the side, and I'll show some pictures of what that car looked like. I still have that motor, and I had full intention on putting it in here, but when I started stripping this motor down and found the original serial number and the high compression block that it is, I knew I had to save it. So here it is. I finally have it all back together. Now that I've got the front fenders painted, I'm getting ready to put the fenders on. I want to put the hood on, but there's just a few things I need to button up inside the engine bay. I need to get some heater hoses on it, which I did. And now I need to fill it with antifreeze. And this car takes 6 gallons of antifreeze. This monster elephant is very thirsty. So I've got 3 gallons of concentrate, and then I'll fill it up with water the rest of the way. We'll get that all full so that it doesn't overheat as I'm playing with it. Fuel system has been completely gone through. I've got all the lines, all the filters, the tank flushed. So everything is ready to fire this thing up. Once I get fuel in the barrels, she should start right up. So let's try it out. Get the antifreeze in first. As I'm filling this up, I'm remembering one other detail about the motor when I pulled it out. Since it was in Nevada, they didn't put antifreeze in the car. It was just straight water. Unfortunately, when he brought it up to northern Utah and put it in his garage, it still had the water in it, but it was at least in his garage, and the garage had just enough heat from the house that it didn't freeze and break. I was fully expecting this motor, when I saw all the rust inside of it, that it would have been frozen and broke. Couldn't find any cracks in it. It all cleaned up. We had to boil it out. I had to put rust chemicals in it to free the rust out of the jackets. The water pump was completely locked up. There was so much rust in the water pump that I had to chisel it out of all the jackets and the ports on the front timing chain cover. all the ports that were inside of that were just full of rust. All of the freeze plugs were rotted out, and so what had happened is one of the lower freeze plugs finally gave and all the water ran out of it. And that's probably what saved this motor. Okay, the radiator is full. It's probably going to have some air pockets in it. I know the heater core is going to be dry, so once I get it started up, it'll circulate throughout the system, get a good warm temperature on it. But I don't have any gas, so I need to go get 5 gallons worth of premium, and we'll put some gas in the tank, and we'll prime the carburetors, and we should be able to fire this thing up. So stay tuned. Doing a quick check to make sure there's no leaks, and there's a leak. The leak appears to be coming from the heater core. My first thought was the heater hose, but it does not appear to be coming from the heater hose. One of the things that the previous owner had done, because of the heavy rust, the heater core was also rotted. So I grabbed the heater core out of the gray Pontiac and I rebuilt the heater system, made it all shiny and pretty, but I really didn't have any way of testing it. Looks like I gotta drain the antifreeze and see if I can figure this out. Well, so much for putting in some gas and starting this up. Fortunately, the guy that rebuilt the radiator did put in a new drain plug. I was a little worried. Draining properly. Alright. I am so glad that I did not put that brand new fender on. The fender does mount right here. So and the core does drop to the inside on the passenger floor. So I don't think it would have really caused me any headaches for it to be in the way, but I certainly wouldn't want to be leaning over a brand new finish, even though I'm not concerned at all about it getting scratched up. But good timing to catch it now before I just have too many other things in the way. I did check on the inside, and it is leaking more on the inside than it is on the outside, so this might be easier if I take out this fender mount tip. It is just a few bolts, but I will try to do it without taking it off. There's a few things to take off on the inside as well. There's some cables that are hooked up that I'll have to remove. Alright, once these are out, we'll move to the inside. And it should just drop right out onto the floor. Okay, everything's off on this side. I see my battery's almost dead, so I'm going to charge up my camera and we'll get resituated and work on the inside. I never did get the dash back together from the previous owner. He had taken it all apart and pulled the heater core out from the other one that was badly corroded. I haven't put it all back together since I put this one in, luckily, so it should make it fairly easy to slide that out. Got a few cables and connections that I need to remove, and then there is one screw that holds it into place. Inside of this little panel is the cable that runs one of the ducts. There are also some ductwork that runs across the top. They're not glued or clamped. So that's out of the way. There are some wires plugged into the top, as well as a vacuum line. And there's one bolt that is very difficult to get to. And I think we are loose. It should be ready to drop out. And out she comes. The heater core is mounted between a couple of plates. There are screws that surround the whole thing. So I'll get it out on a bench and remove all those. Make sure to drain any fluid out so that I don't make a mess. So there was no liquid at all inside the heater core, so there's definitely something blocking it in that valve. So that's definitely where the leak's got to be. And there's some more liquid. Thought I had it all out. Well, I'm certainly glad this showed up now, because once I build up pressure within the system, it would have been quite a leak for it to be leaking without any pressure at all. And there we have it. So I was hoping there would be a leak at this gasket. Then I would be able to just take that off and reseal the gasket. But unfortunately, it looks like it's leaking within this switch. If that's the case, I don't think it's repairable. It's likely that I'll have to replace the switch, and it's not a cheap part. Luckily they are available, but they're 100 to 150 bucks. I'll fill it with water. Let's see if I can tell where that's leaking. I filled the core with water and flipped the switch back and forth. It doesn't appear to be the switch, so I'm hoping it's nothing really major, because this heater core is going to be very difficult to find. I did a quick search, and I didn't find it. If it's bad, I'm hoping it can be repaired. Try not to damage this foam. There's screws that hold the heater core in that are behind the foam. It's not going to be fun to put back together. No obvious signs anywhere. So back to filling it with water and see if I can see where this is leaking. Oh, thanks for watching my video. I'm a little disappointed in this one. Didn't quite turn out the way I'd wanted it to. I was hoping to be able to get this thing started and show you guys how it runs. So I've taken myself out behind the proverbial woodshed, literally. I've put myself to work. I've got some big old logs that need to be split. Gonna set the Pontiac aside for a bit. The heater core did have a crack in it. It was split along one of the seams. So I'm hoping that it's repairable. I've dropped it off at a shop, a radiator shop, and they're pretty confident they can do it. So I will get that in. as soon as I get it back. He said it'd probably be a few days. So then we'll be back to putting the heater core back in, and then maybe I can get it started. I'm so disgusted and with able to get it fired up and get some fuel in it. I'll probably go ahead and put the front clip on before I start it, but we'll see. Thanks for watching. Sorry it didn't quite come about as planned, but it just goes to show what all is involved in these old cars when they've been sitting that long. There's a lot of unknowns. It's not like it was something that was working fine and then got wrecked, and the only thing you have to fix is what was damaged. I'm running into all kinds of issues. I did try to turn the key and nothing happens. It's got a fully charged battery. I've got some wiring issues in the dash. So until next time, thank you for watching, and we'll see you again soon.